Hello again, Econ 160, and welcome to the very last lecture of the course. I'm so glad that we've all made it this far. It's definitely been an unprecedented semester, and I'm sure for many of you it's been filled with a lot of difficulty and a lot of anxiety. But we've all had to adapt, and we're finally here, and I'm happy for that, and I'm sure you're happy about that too. And so something I think you'll appreciate, this is going to be the shortest lecture that I've posted. So the title of today's lecture is The Big Ideas. And the motivation for this lecture is that I wanted to make a lecture that focuses entirely on just the ideas of the course. You see, there are two things that I want you to get out of this course. The first is technical skills, and the second is big ideas. So technical skills are things like knowing how to maximize profits, how to use supply and demand to do comparative statics, or how to calculate a cost function, and all of the other nitty-gritty stuff that you've had to do in your problem sets. Now, these are very important skills to know, and even if you don't remember all the specifics of them 5 years down the road, you've still exercised your brain a lot, and you've strengthened your problem-solving skills and your ability to approach business problems with a logical mindset. And so these are skills that are going to serve you well in your career, especially if you go into business and economics. But now the second thing that I want you to take away from the course is what I call big ideas. These are the ideas that are going to shape your thinking on markets, on government, and on society in general for the rest of your life. And these ideas will serve you well regardless of your chosen profession, whether or not you go into business and economics. And my hope is that they'll shape you into a more informed participant of our great democratic society. George Washington said in his farewell address, "Promote then, as an object of primary importance, institutions for the general diffusion of knowledge. In proportion as the structure of a government gives force to public opinion, it is essential that public opinion should be enlightened." So my hope is that after leaving this course, that you remember some of these ideas and that you feel like your opinions have been enlightened, even if just a little bit. All right, so let's get into the 6 big ideas that I want you to remember from this class. All right, so the first big idea is one that we covered right at the very beginning, that specialization and trade can increase the total amount of resources available to society. And the logic is simple. When people, firms, or countries can specialize in producing the goods that they have a comparative advantage in, then society as a whole is able to produce each good at the lowest possible opportunity cost and thus maximize overall production. And theoretically, if the total amount of resources produced is higher, then there should be a way of allocating those resources in a way that makes everyone better off. So we should be very careful not to restrict trade, because restricting it can reduce the total amount of resources that would be available overall. But we do have to acknowledge one thing, that this hypothetical allocation that makes everyone better off doesn't always happen in reality, and sometimes the gains from trade may be distributed unevenly. And so how much you care about that versus maximizing total output is going to be a normative question, and no one can answer that for you except yourself. But generally speaking, we should be fairly suspicious of policies that aim to restrict trade. Our second big idea is that free and competitive markets are an efficient way to allocate resources. And the reason for this is that in a competitive market, the price is going to rise or fall to the level where the marginal benefit of the consumers equals the marginal cost of the producers. What that means is that every transaction where the marginal benefit is higher than the marginal cost actually occurs, meaning that all mutually beneficial trades are happening in the market, and so total surplus is maximized. The implication of this is that we should be very careful about intervening in free markets. If we're not careful, it's easy to accidentally make things worse. And so if someone proposes to intervene in free markets, sufficient rationale should be given as to why the market is not competitive and therefore require intervention. That being said, our third big idea is that government is often necessary to correct for market failures. Now, many goods and markets do not satisfy the conditions of a competitive market, and when a good doesn't satisfy the conditions of competitiveness, we call this a market failure. And when there are market failures, government often has to step in, as in the case of public goods, common resources, or goods with externalities. At a minimum, just by observation, we see that every society expects its government to provide at least the public goods of national defense and the public good of the enforcement of the legal system. Now, the implication of all this is that if we're considering whether or not government should intervene into a market, a good question to ask is, what is the market failure which would justify that intervention? So, for example, is the good a public good? Is it a common resource? Or does the good generate an externality? By correctly identifying which market failure is occurring, then we can also correctly identify the right policy solutions as well. Our fourth big idea is that taxation leads to deadweight loss. And this happens because taxes drive a wedge between what consumers actually pay out of pocket and what producers actually get, right? And the wedge is there because the government is skimming off the difference. What that means is that mutually beneficial transactions between consumers and producers may no longer happen if the net benefit of that transaction is going to be smaller than the tax, right? And so the reduction in the amount of these mutually beneficial transactions is what causes the deadweight loss. The implication of this is that even though government is necessary, as we argued, we should recognize that there are inherent trade-offs in having to raise taxes in order to fund government programs. And so the benefit of government intervention needs to be weighed against the deadweight loss of taxation. Our fifth big idea is that in competitive markets, neither economic profits nor economic losses can last for very long. If there are profits to be made, competitors will enter the market, thus competing the price down until all the profits are competed away. If there are losses, then some firms are going to exit the market, which bring prices back up a bit until the rest of the firms are no longer making losses. And there are many important implications which stem from this principle. For example, it suggests that we should see profits go down as a young industry matures and more firms enter the market. It also suggests that we can measure the competitiveness of an industry by looking at how much its profits exceed its opportunity cost of capital. Now, the last idea I want to emphasize is that market performance depends on market structure. Although many markets are competitive or close to competitive, not all of them are, and some are going to be more competitive than others. And this might seem pretty obvious, but the implication of it is that analyzing real-life markets is a pretty complicated endeavor. The outcomes in a specific market will depend on many details about how the market is organized, like the number of firms, the number of products they sell, any barriers to entry, and the firm's strategic interactions. So analysis of real-life markets is a very complex task. But thankfully, economists are up to the task and are well compensated for it. Okay, so that's it. Originally, I had planned to discuss some ideas from other areas of economics, but I thought it would be better to just end it here and give you all some extra time to focus on studying for the final exam. So this is the end of the formal content for the course. I thank you for persisting and reaching to the very end. And as a bonus to all of you who made it this far in the video, without shutting it off as soon as you heard it's the end of the content, email me the following code, UUDDLRLRBA, and I'll give you some extra credit as a thank you for making it all the way to the end. Good luck on your studying, and I hope to see you again in person sometime soon, God willing. Bye.